Zoning and land use issues. So, why, as realtors, do you want to understand zoning and land use issues? What comes to mind for zoning and land use issues?
Highest and best use of the property.
Highest and best use, correct? And for the most part, in residential neighborhoods where you're selling houses, the highest and best use is a house. It's not going to change. Where it'll change would be on the end, on a major road, the end of the subdivision or something like that, where you're facing the major road, that zoning could change. And you may not understand or know it. But it's your job as a realtor to know what the zoning is as you're making the showing and getting the listing. You want to talk to people about what their current zoning is and why is it important to understand. So what we're going to talk about, differences between public and private land use restrictions. So that's a lot of what zoning is the public. Identifying the various types of zoning ordinances. How zoning can be unconstitutional. Describe when non-conforming use permits and variances may be authorized. And we're also going to talk about types of private land use restrictions. Another thing that you can do with all of this information, everything you're learning, wherever you live, unless it's the city proper, the village or the small cities you might live in, they're always looking for people to serve on their zoning boards, their planning commissions, and things like that. It's a way to take the knowledge that you've learned over time and put it to public use if you want to volunteer. Okay, so public control of land is zoning. Zoning divides property into sections called zones and regulate the uses that can occur within them. So if I want to check on the zoning, I can go to the Village of Fairfax to our government offices, and when I walk in, I can ask for a zoning map, or I can see a zoning map on their wall. I can go online and I can see the current zoning map as well. So a good way to find out zoning is to go online or go visit if you have questions or calling. Trying to find out about some property that I have in Frankfort, Kentucky, and what's permitted for signage. So I called the city of Frankfort to their planning and zoning department, and I'm talking to one of their staff people to find out what can this future tenant do for signage. What does zoning allow them to do? We're in a planned unit development, but I don't know what the current codes and everything are, so I can talk to a staff person and find that information out. So I can make a representation to a potential tenant about what I think they can do. And that's my job as a property manager to kind of learn that. Because the leasing agent didn't, and the asset manager isn't. It's my phone call to make. So we have zoning authority. It's the police power of government, is the power to control the activities and rights of persons subject to its jurisdiction. So when we have the authority to do zoning, we're telling people that we're doing this in the public good. It's for public welfare that we're making these decisions. It's for the good of many, not always the few. Zoning is permissible if the zoning law promotes the health, safety, and general welfare of the people. It's not arbitrary, unreasonable, or discriminatory. But like I said, for the most part, it benefits the many. It might hurt a few. The delegation authority to local governments is enabling statute. By state law, the authority to control land use is delegated to our local governments. So our villages, our cities, we have the ability to do that. I was on the Village of Fairfax Planning Commission for a long time. We rewrote our zoning. We used the Hamilton County Zoning Code as the basis for rewriting our zoning. Certain things of our community were exactly as they should be and only applied to our community. Other things we were able to take from Hamilton County zoning and write in and make some changes to update the zoning code. So the other thing that you'll find is that we have a master plan. Most of our communities have a master plan. It's a comprehensive plan or general plan for the area to be zoned. It protects existing land uses and ensures that proposed and future land uses will be compatible. So, you're working for somebody that says, hey, I want to develop the last 5 acres of land in that area. You'd want to go to the city or the village and find out the master plan. What's planned, what's anticipated, how is it currently zoned? Can we ask for planned unit development zoning? Can we change the zoning but still make it compatible with the properties around us? So an example of this, I had a property out in Claremont County I was trying to sell, And it was 200 acres, and with the zoning, we could put basically 400 houses. Half-acre lots basically is how it was cut up. But the property had a hillside that dropped off the back of it, so that was really not easy to work with. We had to put sewer lift stations in to make things happen. So the people that were interested in the property decided they wanted to do a planned unit development. They were going to put 200 acres on the property, but they were going to put it on the first 200 units on the property on the first 100 acres. So they were going to intensify the zoning up front. It still wasn't going to change the overall density of the property, but they wanted to intensify the zoning up front. So it wasn't going to be any more people, any more children, students, whatever, to the ambulance, fire department, school systems than what the land already allowed. But at that time, Claremont County was not allowing PUDs to happen. They weren't going to allow them to change the zoning to do this. And so what happened is the property owners eventually ended up selling it, and they sold it. It's 5-acre development, 5-acre estate lots. So they ended up getting more money per acre by doing estate lots, and they didn't have to do as much infrastructure. But they also were just selling land. They weren't able to become a builder and do what they wanted to do to ultimately make money off of it. But again, going back and talking to Claremont County, what was your master plan? How does this work? They really didn't have a good plan. We were kind of on our own, charting what we were trying to do and meeting with a lot of resistance. So we're going to look at this master plan to see if there is something out there that's telling us where they want to go with the uses. If you go to the city of Springdale today, back when I was taking Ed Heyman's class over 30 years ago, I did an appraisal on my parents' property. At that time, I found out the village of Springdale was 95% developed. Today, when I go back and look at the city of Springdale, I don't think there's more than a couple acres in the entire city right now that's left to develop. Because everything that was the pockets at the time, when I was a kid growing up, is all developed now. It's a bunch of condominiums and stuff. So, again, I could have gone to the city of Springdale and pulled up and said, what's going on? What's your master plan? What do things look like? Where is the development going to happen? If there's a 5-acre plot left, how can somebody come in and buy this and do this? So we have zoning ordinances. It's a local government may use several different types of zoning ordinances. And you can read about every one of these things that are exclusive use and cumulative use restrictions. You have intensity, incentive zoning, aesthetic zoning, spot zoning, exclusionary zoning, and inclusionary zoning, depending upon what it is. I can tell you, if you try to do something in the village of Marymount, they have historic review and architectural review of everything that you're doing in certain quadrants of that town. The architectural review is the most tight zoning you could ever get. You buy a house there and you say, I bought a house, but they don't have a garage the way I'd like it to. I want to build a garage behind my house. You assume buying a house there, you'd be able to build a garage. And this is something you need to know for your clients. Just because you bought the house doesn't mean you can put the garage up. You have to be able to do it based on the zoning. Architectural Review District in the village of Marymount says it's got to look a certain way. So it has to go through this whole process of having it looked at. What does the design look like? What are the, not only setback issues, how big is it, but now what does it look like? Is all part of this whole process. People in Marymount love it because it keeps their property values high. And that's the public good. That's what they're going to tell you is the public good. It's good for everybody. But if you're that person who's trying to build that thing garage, you're not happy with the zoning code. Not at all happy. So you need to understand these things exist. You want to help your buyers or sellers understand how to research the zoning. Constitutional challenges to zoning, substantial due process and equal protection claims. People have said that because of zoning, their property was in essence taken. It became an eminent domain case because they couldn't develop it. They couldn't do what they wanted to do with it because of the zoning laws. Well, we've got court cases that say, no, you can't do it. There are constitutional challenges to what it is. We have something called non-conforming uses and structures. A structure that's allowed to continue because it existed when the ordinance was enacted. These are properties that grandfather from current zoning codes. I have a few of them in my neighborhood. I have a corner lot that's a plumbing shop. Before it was a plumbing shop, I think an HVAC shop had it. The corner lot, everything around them is residential. There's a zone, they grandfather, but their lot is actually zoned residential. And the thing there is if they go out of business and are closed for 2 years, it converts to residential use. They can no longer use it for the commercial use. So that's a grandfather. That lets it stay. It's a non-conforming use. Schools, churches are very often non-conforming uses in the neighborhoods they go in, but they ask for it up front. That's all part of being a church or a school, is that you can have a non-conforming use. Doesn't mean you can build what you want. I said, I ended up in a lawsuit with the village. I was on the planning commission, helped them write their zoning code. Wanted to build a 3-car garage in my backyard. Couldn't, because it was a metal garage. Not because it was a 3-car garage, because it was a metal garage. And the mayor didn't like the idea of a metal garage building. We still ended up putting the metal garage up, but we didn't put a 3-car. We ended up cutting it down and making it a 2-car garage. But the metal garage is back there. Did we win? No, because we ended up pouring a concrete pad. We ended up in court for 2 years, spent $13,000, and then I was politely dismissed from the village planning commission after my court case was done, because I thought I knew what the zoning codes were. What I found out is that ZBA, the Building Zoning Board, had lots of authority to be able to twist and interpret the law the way they saw fit, and that's what we ended up going through. So I found out that ZBA and BZA can do a lot of that, and it's very politically influenced, and it happens. What ended up happening after we lost our zoning case is my husband and I went to for the next year, we went to zoning hearings. And people on corner lots, we have a thing in our village that says if you have a corner lot, you can't build a garage. You can't add on to a garage. We have people on corner lots trying to do that. And because we showed up at the zoning hearings, they wouldn't let them do it. But if we hadn't been there, they might have let them do it. We were trying to say, wait a minute, dude, you guys are saying we can't do this, then follow the letter of the law. Follow it exactly.
So you spent $13,000 for legal fees?
Uh-huh. It went on for 2.5 years. Yeah. Not pretty. And I wanted to challenge it, but that's how I learned the hard way of what you can and can't do, what it's all about. I have my garage. I have my metal garage. But it's not 3-car. Variances. A property owner seeks to deviate from the zoning ordinance. So that's ultimately what we were asking for, is a variance. When we finally said, okay, y'all don't agree with what we're trying to do, then give us a variance. Then our neighbors showed up, and they had the right to come to the hearing and say that they didn't like this or didn't want this for whatever reason. That's when you found out how you don't get along with your neighbors, too. I didn't know it, but we found out. It is what it is. Our next door neighbor, their house, they had a garage. They tore it down. You can still see the footer, the foundation where the garage was. They can't build on that garage pad anymore because it's too close to the neighbor's garage for fire reasons. That's a building code. So the house is sold and resold a few times now. The last people that were trying to sell it, they said, well, wait a minute. We could probably get more for our house if we put a garage back up. My husband said, yeah, you could do that, but you can't put it on that pad because they've already tried, because it's too close to the guy next door. You have to move it back to the corner of the lot. And then you have setback provisions. You end up having to put it way into the middle of the backyard. So, again, you ask for variances. You try to do some different things to make it work. Types of variances, you can have area variances and use variances. So the area variance would be the size. You want to build it a little bit bigger. You want to set it a little closer than setbacks. That's when you're asking for an area variance. A use variance would be the change of use, what you're trying to do with the property. It's not allowed in that particular zoning. You're trying to change the use. Changing zoning ordinances. If a landowner cannot obtain a variance, the owner may wish to petition the local government for a zoning change, and you can do that. And ultimately what happens is we went to the ZBA, they ruled on it, we didn't agree with it, we took it to court. That's how it cost us $13,000. We took the village to court, and it was $13,000 in 2 years of court process to do it. Conditional use permits allows the municipality to provide for uses that are inconsistent with existing ordinance but are essential or desirable to a particular area. So again, building the church or school can be a conditional use, or something that benefits the community could be a conditional use. Religious land use, Institutionalized Persons Act. It gives churches and other religious facilities a way to avoid burdensome zoning restrictions on their property use, because most communities where the church is in the middle of the residential area, wouldn't allow a building of that size. But if it's bought for church use, they can say it's religious land use. Now there's this whole thing about, is it really a church? Is it really making money? What? You can go all kinds of ways with that one too. Private restrictions on land use. Private parties can achieve similar results through deed restrictions or covenants. So we can do, in the shopping centers that I manage, we have deed restrictions. We have REAs, easement agreements. We have covenants and conditions where we say that only one AMC theater is allowed there, and you can't build another theater on the property. Only one Topgolf or that type of adventure is allowed on the property. Nothing like that. So we have exclusions in our things. Now, we allow all kinds of restaurants, but in our immediate property, we may not allow another Italian restaurant because we have Bravo. We might not allow another Oriental restaurant because we have a P.F. Chang's. So we can write them specific ways. Any restaurant except another Oriental, except another Italian, or except a seafood because of Mitchell's. So we wrote based on our tendency when we started filling up the center, who was first in line to do things. So we allow all these uses. But the covenant is written contractual promise relating to the land. It's recorded by a landowner on the title to the owner's property and can last into perpetuity. So anytime we want to look up this stuff, it's on file at the courthouse. All these covenants, deeds, restrictions, and all that kind of stuff are on file at the courthouse. You can look up the REAs. They're all there. I have records that show me what they are, and they're things I have to look at constantly to see if we are allowed to let that kind of tenant come in. We always have to be aware of those things that are going on with the property. But we can, because it's privately owned, privately developed, we can say it can have a certain look and have a certain size, certain style, certain use. Those are called private restrictions. So we can say that we own this 150 acres and we can do all of our own restrictions within that 150 acres. We filed the documents. We created the documents for what we want to do, and they're filed in the courthouse. So again, with the land zone maps and stuff like that. Covenant conditions and restrictions. These are typically found in multi-unit dwellings, condominium, typically. CCRs must not violate any constitutional rights, but you can do a lot of things with your CCRs. And you can also have CCRs when you have housing homeowner associations that can say you can only do a certain style fence, you can only do a certain color or look to your roof. You can't work on or you can't store RV trailers in the front part of your yard. They have to go behind. Those can be all part of homeowner associations where you have CCNRs as well. So again, when you're selling real estate and you go into one of these little neighborhoods that has a homeowner association, the seller of the property should be able to give you all of their CCNRs for their neighborhood, so you know what's allowed to do. You're representing a buyer and they're looking at a home like this. Again, research, read it, learn about it a little bit, have them learn about it a little bit, because just because you bought it doesn't mean you can do anything you want to do with it. These CCNRs are more restrictive than zoning. And that is it for this chapter. Is there any questions about any of this stuff? Yeah.
Is there a website or something you can go to kind of look up stuff like that?
Yes. You can go to the county, the Hamilton County, the, what do you call it, treasurers, or when I want to look at my tax parcel. I can look up my tax parcel, auditor's office, thank you. I can look at my tax parcel and I can find out if it's part of one of these areas. And then I can look to see if I can get information on it. Again, the zoning and stuff is all public record. Wherever the community is, you can look up their zoning information online. You can do it now, or you can walk in their office and get copies of it. But if it's a condominium or homeowner association, it might be a little harder to find it. It exists somewhere. You might have to actually go have a property owner give it to you or find out more about that ownership information. Then you could go research it at the courthouse. When you go get title insurance or title commitment, all this stuff's going to be brought out. It'll be presented to you as part of the title commitment. That's after you've already made an offer on it, but you still want to learn about this stuff. When you're taking a listing, anybody you're taking a listing from should have this information if they're part of this type of organization. When they bought the house, they got all the records with their house. They should have them filed away somewhere. So you can ask the questions. You know, where do you have these records filed? Please look and let me know what you know. If I'm going to take the listing on this, I need to know what your current CCRs are. What is allowed in your neighborhood? What are you allowed to do with your house? So you ask the questions. All right. So next week we're going to do 19 and 20. And then we're going to be off for a week because of Thanksgiving. Have a good one.